Today we're going to be building a slab and molding it into a tray shape. So I have a couple of trays. I have a flattened piece of clay. I have a nice silicone mold and my stamps. So I want this to have a nice texture. I also have more clay than what I'm likely going to use. So I'm going to... So don't go right close because this is curved. It is going to take a little bit more clay. I'm going to put this to the side for a second project later. I'm going to cover it with plastic so it can't dry out. Okay, so I am going to stamp the back of this. These to the side. Okay, and for a pattern, I like the bark pattern. If you go in the middle of this, you're not going to get the edges. So if you go to the edges, as you can see, it leaves this really sharp corner, and it's hard to get out later. See? You can still see it. But if you go in the middle, this is a little bit easier with a rolling pin or something, you can keep overlaying it, and it will just keep making a more and more complex pattern. And the more you go over it, the more power you're going to get, the deeper, the more grooves. Make sure you don't push so hard that it goes through. These really deeper lines will create faults. This piece of clay is actually pretty thick, so it's not a worry here. If you've got a thinner piece or using a pattern like a deep rhubarb leaf, that is a real threat. And you can use anything else. You don't need to use molds. You can even go outside and get like branches, grasses, get your kids or your dogs and have their paw prints or fingerprints in it. Good enough. Okay. So there's a trick to this, to get it into this pan, because it is going to need something between it and the clay. It's going to stick. And because our clay shrinks about 20% as it dries, you don't want it to stick. So we are going to put the plastic over here. You can see this? Yes, you can. This out of the way. We're going to gently pick him up and put him on the plastic. Now we're going to cradle it in like that. Make sure it's nicely overlined. You don't want pieces to not hang on. When you push, you can possibly take out your patterns. You more or less take it up and you push down and in to get into your corners. You do it across the side so it doesn't just slide around the tray. So push down and then in. Pick up, push in. So you're basically pushing it in at the corner because there were these grooves. You're basically pushing it into this without pushing down and possibly taking out your texture. You can put a little bit of pressure there if you want to help guide it, and your plastic will slide around a lot, so just keep your eye open for that as well. Okay, so now you can go around and trim everything. Make sure you hold it in place just so it doesn't move anywhere, because this stuff will slide. And try not to cut your plastic too badly. Whoop. As you see right there, my knife just slipped. So we are going to try and mend this. with the plastic, you got thicker plastic, it often will catch your knife and just take it on a ride. So do try to go a little bit slower. So you can see I gouged this corner. We're just going to kind of tack it back together. And this is a nice thing with the bark pattern. I can come back with this, push it in a few times, which will seal it. And you can barely even see the mark. Just going to rescore. So that clay there's a little bit thinner, but otherwise you're not going to notice. So there's that. So if I wanted, I could leave it like this, or I'm going to take this. It is better if I can find a piece of plastic, but I don't have one at the second. So I'm just going to try and fold this over and keep the folds from not lining up. So this has this nice little ridge here that I like. I'm actually going to put them together, line them up so they were the exact same size, and push down. Go in a circular motion. If I want, I can do the upper edges too because they had that nice little lip. And that smoothed out some of the edges. It did contour into the plate to give it that nice beveled edge. And the edges are a little softer than what I like for rounding them, so I'm going to leave the sponging until it's a little drier. But other than that, just touching up some of my edges here because this was a nice beveled plate. That is as simple as it is to make a nice plate. Okay, so I'm going to put it into the side for now, and I will be back in a second to do the next piece. Okay, I'm back with another piece of clay. As you'll notice, this one is much, much thinner. So once again, we're going to stamp it. Not as deep because it is quite thin here. I'm going to make a little tiny pen tray, and often just tracing a simple object is quite easy for what we're after. I'm going to try for pointed corners and see how that goes. If I'm angling this way, I get a little extra clay, as you can see. Angling it out. So I'm kind of at a 45-degree angle here.
Yeah, I took a picture of it actually. We didn't have any here. Yeah, I think they might have ordered some.
Just going to put this to the side and cover it in some plastic so it doesn't get hard on us. Okay. Okay. And often putting a pattern on it will actually thin it out. This is a different kind of roller. This one just at the club here. Just going to take it. As you can see, it is trying to expand. So I'm just holding my finger here to try and keep it while I get even pressure so the pattern is fairly even. Just going to line this up. There we go. So there are some lines here. You can smooth out other tools, bits of sponges, stuff like that. Okay. Okay, see that? Okay, I'm gonna stand back. There we go. So you notice the edges did kind of go out. Now rough trim did leave with a lot more now, as you can see. I'm just going to actually find a geometry set. I'm just going to clean up these corners a little bit so that they're actually straight. This end is narrower than this end, which isn't actually too bad. Oops, what I'm after. Sorry about that. Okay. So, our piece of plastic. So, some flowers on there. If your pattern's really deep, be careful in picking it up because it will go through when it's, especially when it's this thin. Wrap this in there. So I'm going to put it in here. The reason that most people put it on the inside is because when it shrinks, it just goes in, there's no problem. Our clay will shrink 20%. If you put it on the outside and it goes to shrink, it meets the resistance, it'll crack. If you put it on the outside, you let it harden for about 24 or 48 hours, wrapping it really tightly. You take it home, and after that, you can just take it off right at home, or if you come in regularly into the club. Because of how small this is, I'm just going to put it on the inside and see how it turns out. Okay. Yeah, once again. So if you're after a really subtle dish, tapping it will help settle it some. Make sure it stays lined up with your edges here, as you can see. This one's going over. I'm not sure if you can see this. This one's right at the edge because of my tapping, and this one is way, way over. So I could trim it, or I can just use the plastic, realign it, and just use my thumbs gently so I don't take out the pattern. So, because after a really, really gentle slope, I could do this. If you want something a little deeper, once again, take the edges and press in. So that, one, it compacts things, and two, you're not removing your pattern if you like your pattern. Now, as you'll note, sometimes stress cracks will appear. Part of this is the pattern I used as well, right where it lines up with the groove. Just going to keep pressing this in here. So I could let these little corners come out. As you can see, this one's doing some weird bend. I'm actually just going to tweak him out. I'm not sure if you can see this. There we go. I'm going to try and pinch him in and out, just to make this nice little cute corner. As you can see, you're not quite even, which is why your tray can slide still a little bit. If you're into rounded corners, then you can also just take your knife and just trim around the edges. So that's how you do your corners. Just because of how uneven this is, and you can see it, I'm not so fond of it like this. So we are going to take our knife, or our sharp, sorry, and we're going to cut it all around the edge. Make sure you have your piece in as far as you like, because this will affect that. Also anchor it as you run your sharp along it, because it's going to want to move. It's on the plastic, so it's meant to slide, so it's not going to stick. Angle the sharp. Once again, watch your fingers so you don't lose your pattern. And there we go. So now he looks actually much better for this particular shape. I'm just going to tuck in his corners a little bit more. Just because he is so small, it's going to make him look a little bit more delicate. There we go. Now, if I really want, I could take a damp sponge and gently smooth the edges. But to be honest, at this stage, it's better off being left a week until it's leather hard. Then it's going to smooth a lot easier. You're not going to risk botching out parts of your pattern. So we're just going to cover this, and we'll come back and look at it next week. We're cover it because it is such a small and thin piece. You're going to cover it very well. Okay, and that is it for our 2 trays. We'll see you in a week. Okay, so welcome back. It's been a week. Here is our big platter. As you can see, this one's still a little bit wet. If I try and lift it out, it bends. We don't want that. So I'm just going to put this aside for the next week. And our small tray is dry enough to clean. So we're going to pull it out. Once again, use the plastic like a hammock, just so you don't break any corners. Let's put it back in. When people go to pick things up, they'll often put their thumb over the corner. Don't do that because it's very good for cracking, particularly in plates and trays. So we're going to pick it out like this. Peel it away from the plastic. As you can see, it's still damp. It's leather hard right now. This is also a good time when it comes to cleaning it. So you can see the words came out. You can always tack them back in. So you can either use your tools and very lightly go over the edges, just making sure you keep them even. It's not always that easy. Something as small as this, you're usually better off getting a sponge. Now a little bit of magic water, because chlorine water will make it crack. And you're just going to take the sponge, go over it a few times with the damp, once or twice with the dry. I don't know if you can see that, but the edge is basically gone. So that's kind of what we're after. So you're just dulling the edge, just so there's not going to be any sharp bits. It's still a bit wet. There we go. Just run your finger or thumb along it. Make sure it's not sharp. Trying to show you some angles there. I'm not sure it's working. Don't press too hard because it will be a little bit fragile. And their trick is to take one of your sharps and just go take the flat edge or the straight edge along the piece, and that'll basically pull down all the sharp edges as well. It depends how flat you want it. So right now it's still soft enough, it's slightly suggestible. Just to get rid of that line, just take your sponge again, once more. Some of these I just did leave a little bit of a ridge from that. Just go through, smooth it out. Just use your finger to go over the edges. Make sure there's nothing sharp anywhere. Just going to carve this. Okay, and he's ready. Just leave him dry from there a couple of weeks and he'll be good to fire. Take the crumbs off that. I'll come back next week for our bigger guy. Okay, and welcome back. So this week it is hard enough for us to clean. Once again, you use the plastic like a cradle. Carefully pick it out. It is going to be delicate, so be very gentle with it. And we could have a little bit of fun getting the plastic away. Just have to work at it. Never hold it just like this, because I know it has a tendency to snap out. Always support it from the back end here as well. Okay, there we go. The back is actually pretty good. That's nice. Okay, so first things first is you're going to look at the edges. These all need to be cleaned up, otherwise they're going to be too sharp and they're going to cut someone. Okay, always use your hand as a base. The more support you can give it, the better it is right now. You can either use a cutter to trim it, or you can use a sponge to round it. I have quite a bit of overhang here, so I actually do need to trim this. Doesn't need to be perfect. I'll be taking a sponge to it in a little bit here. You can set it upside down, but be very careful because if you push down, it's going to fracture in pretty easily. And make sure you don't take out too much because your tools will have a tendency to bite into the clay. Okay, I can come around and I can tidy up any of the edges where your bevels. Not sure if you can see it, but like in the edges. You can see some that have folded out, some that are folded back. I just get to go around and fix some of those up. It's better to do lots of small trimming because you can always trim more on or trim more off. It's impossible to put it back on usually. That's a rough one. Let's just turn it upside down. There we go, get some of those things out of the way. So I'm going to come back here. I still have edges here that I'm need a little bit more trimming. Cut our cutter. Not sure if you can see this. I'm just tracing it right along level without trying to dig in too much. This is kind of like the fine tuning stage. Okay, so there's that. I think I've trimmed enough off of this. Just go along over it, check everything. This surface is actually quite nice. I don't need to do anything here. Just dust off the pieces that may have stuck previously. And I am going to sponge this edge just because there's far too many sharp edges still left on it. And the sponge is the easiest way to get rid of those. When sponging a heavily textured thing, just be careful where you sponge because it will slowly take the pattern out. So go just enough to remove the rough edges, but not enough that you're going to lose all your pattern. And then as you look, you can see that some of these spots aren't quite deep enough, so you can go back and trim more if needed. Just go along it though, run your finger over it. If there's anything that feels kind of sharp to your finger, it'll be way too sharp once it's fired. So just smooth it out. Keeping in mind that my hand is underneath here the whole time supporting it, just so there's no pressure going too much on one edge. I'm not quite happy with how this one corner is. Get rid of those crumbs. Just needs a bit more trimming. There we go. There we go. Got rid of that lump there. Okay. And I don't feel anything rough on the surface, but I'm still going to give it just a quick wipe down, just in case there's something there that I can't feel at the second, because there could be something in these grooves, and the sponge might get in here and help with that. So, just to be on the safe side, we're going to give it a quick sponging. There we go. And the back is pretty much all completely smooth. You can fix up any of these little divots if you're interested in it. I'm not going to bother being on the bottom of the platter like this. And that is it. It can now go dry for a couple of weeks and it will be good for firing.